Beer and buds. It's 0 to Beero. I'm here all week.
Hey guys, I'm Alex.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to our first episode where we are going to talk about brewing a pumpkin ale. But before that...
Our session ale of the session is Field to Ferment Fresh Hop Pale Ale by Fremont Brewery.
Yup, keeping it
Amazing
local.
brewery. Honestly, I love them. This is an incredible beer, by the way. If you like the Fremont Summer Ale, you'll probably like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's nice. It's got a really good hoppy aroma. Not grassy. Really fresh. It's fresh hopped.
Yeah, it really pops.
All right, so we're going to get right into it. Talking about this pumpkin ale that we brewed last week. 2 weeks. Last week?
It was last week because I transferred to the...
Yeah, we transferred yesterday.
Transferred yesterday.
All right.
So should we talk about the grain bill first?
All right, so start talking about this grain bill.
So the first thing we have here is 13 pounds of Row Malt. Now, anyone who's brewed before knows that this is the backbone of your beer. And it does matter what 2-row you pick, especially for lighter ales, but this is a stout, so pretty much any 2-row will work fine. You'll get a very similar taste. Next on the list is 1 pound of chocolate malt. Chocolate malt, it lends itself, it's more of a darker chocolate taste. Like it's called chocolate malt, but if you're there in the store or there, I don't know where you would be. If you're tasting the chocolate malt, though, then it has kind of a dark chocolate or a coffee almost taste. It gives it a little bit of a bitter, maybe a little bit of an ashy kind of a taste, but also like a dark, no better way to describe it than coffee or chocolate taste. Put a pound of that in. It's pretty good for stouts or porters. A pound will do. Typically more is uncalled for. You can do less depending on how you want things to taste. Next up, we have 12 ounces of roasted barley. Roasted barley really is more of a stout thing. I think you can use it in porters as well. But for stouts, it's extremely common to use either roasted barley or patent black, which I think is actually just called black, and then it has like parentheses and patent in it. I like to call it patent black. I think it's catchy. Patent black. The difference between roasted barley and patent black is, first of all, the level bonds, which is the unit by which they measure, how dark the grain is and how dark it can make your beer. Patent black is much darker. It's sitting around 500 level bonds. Roasted barley, I think, can get up to 500, but I don't think that's typically where you find it. I think it's more in the 300, 400 range. So, I think that pretty much covers it as far as level bonds go. One other thing you get from roasted barley and patent black is the kind of harshness, the kind of ashiness. I don't know if everyone would describe it like this, but when you drink a stout, there's always that just kind of an ashy flavor. Not a bad ashy flavor, but it's just a little bit harsher, deeper, darker kind of a flavor to it. Roasted barley and patent black will both give you a sizable amount of that ashy flavor. And I believe roasted barley's is not as sharp. Like patent black is just boom, ashy. Yeah. And roasted barley is more of like a subtle rolling ashy in the background.
Yeah.
Again, difficult to describe flavors with weird adjectives that aren't actually made for that. So that's roasted barley, patent black, and we're using 12 ounces of roasted barley. I've probably said that already, but I just wanted to go over it again.
Yep.
8 ounces Crystal 60L. Crystal malts are a little bit weird. They're like when people really got into malting, they started doing like some black magic malting nonsense. I'm not a maltster, so I can't tell you their secrets. But so we have Crystal 60L. And that means we're going to get more of a caramely flavor, a lot more unfermentable sugars, which just means that obviously...
End of the day, the beer is going to end up having a more naturally sweet...
Yeah. Because if they're unfermentable, the yeast isn't going to ferment them, and then you're left with those sugars, and it still tastes sweet. which is important for styles like the Stout. So we have the Crystal 60L, 8 ounces of that. And then we have Special B Malt, 4 ounces. A Special B, as far as I could understand, is it's essentially like a Crystal 180, I want to say, 160. It's like way up there. 160L or 180L or something like that. So it's like really caramely. It's been really gone into this kilning process that they use to make it the way it is. And it's typically used stouts and porters. I know, right? Shocker, it's in the stout recipe. I'm sure there are other uses. I've never used it for other things. But yeah, Special B Malt. It's always nice to have a little bit of that in there. 4 ounces, Carapils. Might not be necessary, but I like to throw it in. It adds a little bit of fermentable sugars. Really not why you add it. And it adds proteins to help you get a better head on your beer. Like you get that little extra foam. Not too much. 1% of the grain bills, Carapils. Rice hulls. We're getting to rice hulls. It's 8 ounces.
Yeah.
And I know rice hulls are not supposed to be over 3% because the flavor that rice hulls are going to add to your beer is pretty subtle. But at just over 3%, you can start to taste it. Like if you know what you're looking for, you can pick it out. Most people don't though, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. And rice hulls in general, I wouldn't worry about. I used them in this recipe because I'm using pumpkin. And pumpkin really gums up the mash. And just the way my equipment's set up, I don't want to deal with a stuck sparge. It is just not on my agenda to figure out how to unstick that. Because I'm like, immediately you think, oh, just put a reverse pressure in there, blow into the...
into the filter?
Yeah, into the filter, and that'll just blow all of the gunk out, and like, it'll free everything up. It'll be fine. Really, more than that, the end of the filter's made out of metal, so it's hot. It's really hot. I wouldn't put my mouth on it. I wouldn't put my fingers on it. I just don't want to deal with it. That's why I'm using rice hulls.
That's what air pumps are for, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's carry an air pump around. That's the grain bill for the pumpkin. So for hops, I used East Kent Goldings. It's a stout. It's a pumpkin ale. I know you know, but I mean, like, clearly hops, not a big deal for this beer. But stout is not really a hoppy beer, clearly. So we're using East Kent Goldings. Get a nice earthy, little spicy aroma. I have 1.5 ounces. Which are added at the 60-minute mark for bittering. And I'm using like year-old East Kent Goldings.
Right.
Which means I didn't actually add 1.5 ounces. I added closer to 2.41
2.4.
2.4 ounces of East Kent Goldings because they lose some of their
potency.
Their bittering power. I think it's like alpha percent. Anyway, so they do have a shelf life, and I did have to compensate for that in this recipe. Same thing for my next edition. I added 1 ounce of the East Kent Goldings at 20 minutes because it is an earthy, spicy kind of an aroma and a taste to it. That can definitely have a place in a stout. Like, I don't want it to be a prominent flavor or a prominent aroma. I don't want people to smell it and be like, yes, the good old EKG, East Kent Goldings. But I do want it to be there to help back the rest of the flavors up.
Yeah.
So that's hops. Real easy on this recipe. Next thing we have on the list is 58 ounces of Libby's 100% pure pumpkin. Pumpkin ale, using pumpkin.
4 pounds.
Now, to be completely fair, there are a lot of recipes that don't use pumpkin in their pumpkin ale.
But that said, adding the pumpkin really does bring out a nice, natural, pumpkin aroma. Because a lot of pumpkin ales, they might just be pumpkin spice ales, which means that they use the pumpkin spices, but they don't actually put the pumpkin in there. And you get just a really heavy, like, nutmeg note with some cinnamon onto it. And it kind of lacks that pumpkin
depth.
Yeah.
The pumpkin-y depths.
The pumpkin-y depths.
Yeah, I do agree. I'm like, obviously, that's why I added the pumpkin. I think the pumpkin adds an extra little piece to it that just pulls the beer all together, really makes it, honestly, a pumpkin ale.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be fair, pumpkin is a bit of a headache to deal with. And it is, it is a cost.
Yep.
So if you don't want to use pumpkin, don't use pumpkin. It's not huge. It's not a huge deal. Having said that, that's the pumpkin. We get into the spices. No, I'm not really a baker, and these are mostly baking spices. So
yeah,
I winged it really hard on this. Alex knows because he corrected me on some of my spice mistakes. Yeah.
But I mean, let's just go down the go down the spice list and talk about the amounts and everything and the ratios.
Yeah, so half a teaspoon ground allspice at burnout. So as soon as you turn the stove off from the boil, or even 30 seconds beforehand, just like to make sure everything's sanitized in there. Originally, I had a teaspoon because I smelled the allspice, and I was like, it doesn't smell that potent. I'll just,
throw it in. But then I was like, no, when you start cooking with it, it really gets big in things. Like, the flavor profile of it, it's pretty strong. So we were just like, hey, let's dial it back a little bit so that we don't get too much of one note all thrown together at one time.
As far as other ground ingredients go, we have quarter teaspoon ground nutmeg. Honestly, nutmeg in this recipe, as far as I'm concerned, should be more of a background flavor, even compared to the allspice. I mean, like, none of these should be very foreground. None of these should, like, take the stage.
Yeah.
But nutmeg should be, like, background. Just like a supporting flavor. So speaking of background flavors, ginger root. You don't want your ginger root to be shining too through on this beer. It's a nice background flavor. Even like when you're cooking something, I feel like with ginger and these other spices, you're like, well, ginger will be there to help out the other flavors. But you're never like, yep, I want this to taste like chow mein. Better like stock up on the ginger. So that's a ginger root. I use actual ginger root. Obviously, you can use the ground ginger.
Yeah.
I used the ginger root, and so my advice is going to revolve around that. I used 1 ounce of ginger root. I would recommend more in this particular beer because, like, it was already kind of hydrated. So when I threw the root in there, it wasn't just like it didn't.
By the way, we chopped up the root so we can maximize the surface area of the engagement of root to liquid.
Yeah, it'd be weird if you just like chopped off a piece of root
and threw it in there. That you lose a lot of potential.
But even so, I'd recommend more, just because the turnaround from flavor in there.
Yeah,
but definitely for these, you want to err on the side of less than more because you can add some spices. When you transfer to secondary, if you really think that's a problem. If you underspice it, worst case scenario, you get a pretty good stout that has like this very faint sense of wanting to be something else.
Yeah.
So it's not, the worst case scenario on underspicing is not that bad. Cloves, I did 2 cloves.
We were at 3.
Yeah, we were at 3. We went down to 2. Cinnamon sticks. There are 2 cinnamon sticks. It equated to about half an ounce.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, of course, like we had 1 fatty cinnamon stick and then like a couple skinny ones.
Yeah.
So one, like, just saying cinnamon stick isn't like a good measurement.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying vanilla bean.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know how fresh those were either. So,
mm-hmm.
So like you gotta take the recipe with a grain of salt because doing exactly what I say will not get you the beer I have.
Yeah. I mean,
like even if I did the things that I have written here, I wouldn't get the same beer I have.
On to our secret ingredient, though.
It's the secret ingredient is 1 pinch of curry powder.
And actually, I've done this for...
At burnout.
Yeah.
So the same as the allspice and the nutmeg.
Mm-hmm. And I've actually done this for other recipes, for like pumpkin pie. It gives it this like really nice flavor. But when he said that he was going to add a pinch of curry powder, I'm like, my man, I know exactly what you're going for.
I was just rummaging through the spice cabinet, and I was like, yep, this goes into pumpkin, this goes into pumpkin. And I was like, and what's that smell? That'll go into pumpkin. And I looked around, and I was like, oh, it's curry powder. So I'm like, clearly you don't want to add too much curry powder to your beer. That's going to taste terrible. So I was very careful. Mm-hmm. Alex can attest to my addition of the curry powder.
Yeah.
It was extremely minimal. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, I followed the err on the side of less philosophy a lot on this one. And I don't know how much I can really taste it. I'm waiting until I taste the finished product to see whether I can actually pick out the curry powder, knowing that I put it there. I very much doubt anyone will be able to pick it out if they don't know. So, the yeast. I used 1028 London Ale W yeast. If I'm going to be honest, as long as you use an appropriate stout yeast, I haven't noticed a huge difference between them. I think the stout, honestly, benefits more from the grain bill you select. I think it is heavily reliant on the specialty grains. Mm-hmm. But it's not to say you can just pick any old yeast and throw it in there. That's a bad idea. We actually have a Imperial Russian Stout that we decided to use the Safe Ale 05 yeast on. And this is kind of a weird citrus flavor. It's not a terrible... I mean, it's drinkable.
You know what? To be honest, that weird citrus flavor makes it really easy to go down, and then you end up getting just slapped with that, what was it, 8.5?
Yeah, you don't pour a whole glass of that one. Yeah. But at any rate, the London Ale W yeast, from what I can remember, it gives you some fruity flavors. It says it works well. I think on the package it's like, works well with stouts or something like that. Dark beers. Probably works great with porters too. Kind of a thing, So
yeah, check in for the next episode. But yeah, so check in with us next episode. So check us out. Check us out next episode. We'll be going over the brew day. We'll be going over our transfer from primary to secondary. You know, how the flavors developed, what we feel about how things are going, and we'll keep rolling and get you guys filled in on this pumpkin ale and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, we'll talk about more beers.
Yep.
That way, if you're in the region we're in, you'll be able to know what we think about specific products that you have access to.
Yeah. So yeah.
You're welcome.
All right, signing out. See you later.